Okay, the Ames 85 and the XM4 are both excellent weapons in Call of Duty Black Ops 6. They might seem very similar at the surface level, but they do have different purposes. In this video, I'm going to tell you all about them, tell you everything you need to know, and I'm going to give you 4 of the best builds to try, depending on your playstyle, and yes, they are the mythical, fabled, no recoil builds. This is a realistic portrayal of what you might expect from these weapons if you're an average or above average player. Now let's move on to the Ames 85, and my first impression with this weapon was that it was overall better than the XM4, but that impression changed over time, and I'll get to that in just a moment. In general, the Ames packs more of a punch than the XM, and it is better at long distances at the sacrifice of some mobility and some fire rate. It can also be made to have basically no recoil like a lot of weapons in this game. And actually, I was rocking a 4x scope on it since I play on the mouse, which can potentially give you a little bit of an advantage at long range, and maybe a disadvantage at short range, and I was annihilating people left, right, and center. It was bedlam, I was going crazy, I was popping off, the world was my oyster. But then something changed. People started getting good at the game and at the Omni movement, and I was playing in lobbies where my long distance game wasn't good enough. And I had to ask myself, is it me or is it the game? And I'm pretty confident that the ultimate answer is both. Yeah, I can always get a little bit better, but I realized that long-range scopes in this game are worse than in past Call of Duties. They're worse because this game is just so much faster than usual, and if you're going ACOG, you're playing against how the game was designed. It's not wrong to do that or anything, but you're making things harder on yourself. If you're a super pro, I don't think it matters too much what kind of scope you use, but for your average or above average player, long distance scopes have a lot less value. They'll slow you down, they'll make you less mobile. You won't be as good by default as with a shorter range scope. So once I put on a regular scope, I started seeing way more success and found that with a mouse, the long distance game isn't really that long anyway. So the extra zoom doesn't really benefit me that much personally. Black Ops 6 maps are pretty small anyway compared to, most other FPS maps or even other Call of Duties. So the type of long range that you get into in Black Ops 6, it's a lot shorter than most other games. And ultimately, the scope doesn't change what the weapon can do. It can still pack a punch at distances longer than the XM4. It still slows down your playstyle a little bit, but if you can cook with it and you don't want to be constantly running around, the Ames is still a great AR. Now with that said, let's move on to the XM4, and it's basically your M4 from other Call of Duty games or other FPS games. It's the go-to all-around AR that gives you solid mobility, fire rate, and decent but not the best-in-class damage. It's super accurate, and it can be made to have even less recoil than the Ames, which is jokes because the XM4 becomes a frickin' laser beam that you want to frickin' attach to a frickin' shark head. Bonus points if you understood that reference and you're old like me. But anyway, I thought at first the XM4 was a bit of a pea shooter, but that's not the case at all. You can still down guys very quickly. Now, of course, it's not an SMG. You might lose out in some of those scenarios, but it's a great all-around weapon. And as I used it more and more, I realized that it's basically just a weapon for any situation. Sure, you can go in a specific direction more with other weapons, but the XM4 is the old reliable that you can always bust out in any mode, any map. It's never going to really let you down. It's never going to give you up. It's never going to run around. It's never going to hurt you. I think the XM4 is extra appealing if you're looking to never think about recoil, or you never really want to think about the weapon that you're using. You just want to have something that works. Plus, with the XM4 firing faster and you using it at shorter distances than the Ames, I personally found that to just be more fun to play in Black Ops 6. At the end of the day, I play these games for fun. I'm not looking for, any other magical reason. I'm not grinding camo. I'm not grinding, I don't even know what I'm grinding, but I'm not trying to join an esports team. I'm just trying to have as much fun as possible. And I think the XM4 is a more fun weapon, at least in my opinion. At the end of the day, to me, the XM4 is kind of the go-to, hey, you're playing an FPS, buddy. Here is your weapon. Go to town. It's that kind of gun. It's kind of like a gentle hug from a friend you haven't seen in a while, but he's always going to be your boy. It's kind of like your parents tucking you into bed when you're a toddler, but with slightly more bullets. Am I right? Or just my childhood? No? Okay. Let's move on now to the Ames versus XM4 direct comparison. So to break it down completely and in simple terms, the Ames is better at long distance damage, while the XM4 is better at mobility and recoil control. So that means that the Ames supports a longer distance game, whereas XM4 is focused around a shorter one, kind of mid-range. And the thing with the Ames is that it makes you more of a stationary player, whereas the XM4 kind of fits any situation, even though it's not necessarily best in class for any situation. And like I said, I think the XM4 is more satisfying and fun to use, but again, that's just my personal opinion. And with the Ames, I actually have had much higher highs. You know, I've had way bigger score streaks. I've eliminated way more people in matches, but I also have lower lows with it, whereas the XM4 has always provided me with a consistent all-around experience. Honestly, I can fully recommend both weapons and just see which one you like more. You can't go wrong with either one of them. Alright, now let's talk about the best Ames 85 no recoil 8 attachment build, but hold on. Don't just screenshot this and rush off to instantly copy this build, because you need to know what all these things do. You need to know why we have the suppressor there instead of even more recoil control. You need to know how this works because your playstyle might be a little bit different to mine. So you need to understand where you're going to potentially tweak this down the road as you get more comfortable with it. But for now, let's talk about the fire mod. So we've got recoil springs here, and that gives us, as you can see, a pretty good buff to recoil, or debuff to recoil, I should say. Helps us out. And if you're running 8 attachments, recoil springs is not optional. You need to have that on there to lower your recoil further. For stock, I actually run with balanced. I know this is maybe not the most popular option in the world, but having that ability to move a little bit quicker, but also have better strafing movement and also a little bit of hip fire movement, you know, it just kind of gives you more of that all-around goodness that this weapon is already good at. So you're doubling down on the all-around aspect. Next up, we're putting in the quick draw grip because assault rifles do take longer to bring up to your face. So that's really what we want here. It's not really negotiable for ARs, at least, you know, if you're using them in an all-around fashion and you're not being stationary. And then we have the magazine. So the extended mag 1, it does improve ammo capacity down to, or up to 45. And the reason why we run this is that in this game, you run out of bullets so quickly, you fire so much, TTK isn't super low, so you're going to want to have bullets, more bullets, so that you're not constantly reloading. You can feel free to disagree about this, but unless you're a pro player, running the 45 extended mag on this is an absolute must. And another absolute must is the vertical foregrip. So this is going to compensate for tons of horizontal recoil, and you really want that because vertical recoil is really easy to deal with. You just aim downwards, but horizontal recoil is more of a modifier on your recoil, and that's why you want to reduce it as much as possible. So if you're maybe a little bit confused by this, yes, this is correct. I'm not making a mistake. The vertical foregrip is the thing that reduces your horizontal recoil. Now let's move on to the barrel here, and I like to run the long barrel. So if I take it off here, let's see, and I'm just like looking at another barrel. You can see damage at effective range, 8.3 meters, 55.9 meters, but if we put on the long barrel, that becomes 10.7 and 72.6. And that might sound like not a lot, but it does make quite a bit of a difference when you're using the Ames 85 at kind of medium to long range. Now, the most controversial choice on this 8 attachment build for the Ames is the suppressor. Why? Because it gives you no recoil benefit. Meanwhile, the compensator gives you some recoil control. The muzzle brake, you know, can give you better burst fire, first shot recoil as well. Porta compensator gives you some more recoil control. But why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Well, remember, vertical recoil is really easy to compensate for. You just aim downwards. So the compensator doesn't really benefit me that much. The ported compensator also doesn't really benefit me that much. The muzzle brake, I'm not really firing in burst mode because I'm going full auto because I'm making this gun really easy to control. So that just leaves me with a suppressor, which gives us a free bonus of no minimap firing ping. And the suppressor is great at catching out the types of opponents that only kind of stare at the minimap. Like they pay more attention to the minimap than they actually do to what's going on around them. So with the suppressor, you're actually getting some quote unquote free eliminations from, you know, players that are getting caught out just kind of watching the game instead of playing it. Now, as you get deeper into the game's cycle, the suppressor becomes less useful because people keep getting better and better at the game. And at that point, you know, if you want to mix things up, feel free to put something on here, one of these other ones, because we're already putting 8 on, so it doesn't hurt, right? Now, for the optics, I like the Merlin Mini, and the reason why I like it is just because it is small. It doesn't really get in the way like some of the other scopes. It looks nice, but also it just doesn't block my vision or anything like that. Now, if you are confident in your abilities or good at controlling recoil, this is the 5 attachment version of the 8 attachment build we just looked at. So you'll notice here the barrel is different. I put on the bullet velocity barrel, and that's because if I'm running 5 attachments on the Ames 85, I want it to be slightly more of an all-around gun, and bullet velocity helps out a lot with that, especially when you're talking like short range exchanges with the SMGs or like the XMs that other people are using. I would say that the vertical grip and the extended mag are 1,000,000% must-haves for this. I would personally say the quick draw. Why did my voice crack there? I would personally say the quick draw is also a must-have, but I know that that one is a little bit more subjective. And then, of course, with the barrel, if you want to run something else, you can. But this is the 5 attachment version for the Ames 85 build that you want to be using for good performance, good recoil reduction, just greatness all around. Okay, now let's talk about the best XM4 no recoil 8 attachment build. It's very similar to the Ames 85 build. So again, don't just copy this expecting great results. Let me explain to you how it works so that you can make any adjustments if you need to as you get more familiar with it. So we've got the recoil springs here, not really negotiable in an 8 attachment build. It just reduces our recoil. And we have the heavy stock here, reduces flinching because with the XM4, you're going to be getting into more flinching scenarios. Like, you know, you're rolling up on somebody, they're shooting at you, you're shooting at them. Because it's more all around, you're getting into more of those direct engagements. But you can also swap this out for the balance stock to further double down on the mobility that the XM4 gives you if you want that. Next up, you have the quick draw grip, which I already explained for me is non-negotiable. You have the extended mag, which is 1,000,000% non-negotiable. You have the vertical foregrip to reduce recoil at the horizontal levels. You got the gain twist barrel here, which increases bullet velocity. So really, we're making this thing fire like crazy. So if I don't have that on, it's 750, right? But then we put on the bullet velocity, it's 1050. It's crazy how fast this AR fires. And then with the suppressor, again, you don't need to really worry about vertical recoil. So these other things don't really help you as much. But if you are continuing to struggle with recoil, put one of these things on instead of the suppressor. I just like the suppressor because it gives you free kills to opponents that are not paying attention. And of course, with the scope, I like the Merlin Mini just because it's low profile, doesn't really get in the way. And here we have the 5 attachment XM4 build. It's going to have very little recoil, so not as little as the previous build, but this is still good all around if you want to be running more perks, things like that. But the thing to note is that the XM4 has already so little recoil to begin with that sometimes you can get into situations where you have so little recoil on it that you're just overcompensating on your stick or mouse and you're missing your shots because of that. If you run into that situation, then feel free to take off some of the recoil attachments. I know that that sounds strange or weird, but it's the truth. When you have almost no recoil, you might be used to other shooters or other weapons and you might overcompensate. So if you're finding yourself missing a lot of shots with a hyper accurate weapon, that's a sign that you're overcompensating, and you can adjust the weapon or you can try to adjust your playstyle. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you learned something new, if you had a good time. That lets me know that I should make more Black Ops 6 videos for you. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.